In the golden glow of a 1936 summer, the Sapphire Yacht set sail, a floating palace of luxury and secrets, carrying a cast of glamorous guests to celebrate Sir Reginald Haverford's 60th birthday. But when Sir Reginald vanishes without a trace, leaving only a sapphire cufflink and a cryptic letter, the glittering voyage turns deadly. Who among the elegant passengers, his grieving wife, his secretive daughter, a vengeful actress, or a cunning playwright, holds the key to his fate? Enter Hercule Poirot, the meticulous Belgian detective, whose little grey cells unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and hidden motives. Will a torn coat, a missing pendant, or a whispered argument reveal the truth? Or will the killer strike again before Poirot's genius exposes them? Dive into a classic Agatha Christie mystery, where every clue counts, and the shocking truth awaits in the shadows of the Sapphire Yacht. Chapter 1. The Shimmer of the Sapphire Yacht. In the late summer of 1936, the Sapphire Yacht gleamed under the soft English sun, its polished deck reflecting the azure waters of the Devonshire coast. Moored at the quaint harbour of St. Mary's Quay, the vessel was a marvel of modern luxury, its sleek lines and towering masts drawing admiring glances from the villagers ashore. It was the pride of Sir Reginald Haverford, a retired industrialist whose fortune in steel had purchased not only this floating palace, but also the envy of many. The yacht was to host a select gathering of guests for a week-long voyage to celebrate Sir Reginald's 60th birthday, a grand affair, or so it was intended. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal friend and chronicler of Hercule Poirot's exploits, stood at the quay, his straw hat tilted against the sun's glare. He adjusted his tie, feeling a touch out of place among the opulent crowd assembling to board. Hastings had been invited at the behest of Poirot, who himself had been summoned by Sir Reginald for reasons not entirely clear. "A delicate matter, Hastings," Poirot had said with that familiar twinkle in his eye, "one requiring the little grey cells." Hastings, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic ways, had packed his suitcase and joined his friend without further question. The guests were an eclectic mix, each radiating the polish of wealth or the charm of ambition. Sir Reginald himself, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a widowed heiress whose sharp wit was matched only by her sharper tongue, and Mr. Victor Crane, a playwright whose latest work had scandalized London's theatre scene. There was also Miss Irene Duval, a French actress of modest fame, whose presence seemed to unsettle Clara, and Mr. Harold Weston, Sir Reginald's solicitor, a man of dour demeanour and meticulous habits. Finally, there was young Mr. Philip Marlowe, a distant cousin of Sir Reginald, whose easy charm and vague occupation as a gentleman of leisure raised more than a few eyebrows. The air was thick with polite conversation, the clink of champagne glasses, and the faint hum of anticipation. Yet beneath the surface, Hastings sensed an undercurrent of unease. A glance exchanged too quickly, a laugh that lingered too long. Something was amiss, though he could not put his finger on it. He turned to Poirot, who stood impeccably dressed in a cream linen suit, his moustache waxed to perfection, his eyes scanning the crowd with the precision of a watchmaker. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, "what exactly is this delicate matter Sir Reginald mentioned? You've been rather tight-lipped." Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. "Patience, my dear Hastings. All will be revealed in time. For now, observe. The human heart, it betrays itself in the smallest of gestures. Regarde, the way Miss Clara clutches her fan, the way Mr. Weston avoids the gaze of Mrs. Langley. There is a story here, and it is not a happy one." Before Hastings could press further, a steward announced that the yacht was ready to depart. The guests filed aboard, their voices mingling with the cry of gulls overhead. The Sapphire Yacht cast off, gliding smoothly into the open sea, its white sails billowing against the sky. Hastings felt a thrill of adventure, tempered by the nagging sense that something darker lay ahead. The first evening aboard was a spectacle of decadence. The dining saloon, adorned with crystal chandeliers and mahogany paneling, hosted a feast of lobster bisque, roasted pheasant, and delicate pastries. Sir Reginald presided at the head of the table, toasting his guests with a vintage Bordeaux. Lady Evelyn, seated opposite, spoke little, her eyes fixed on some distant point. Clara, seated beside her, seemed distracted, her fingers toying with a pearl necklace. Dr. Blake regaled the table with tales. Make of our host's demeanor tonight. He is jovial, yes, but there is a strain in his laughter, n'est-ce pas? Hastings frowned. He seemed merry enough to me, perhaps a bit flushed from the wine. Poirot shook his head. No, no, mon ami. The wine, it loosens the tongue, but it does not hide the heart. Sir Reginald is a man who fears something, or someone, and that fear, it is shared by others on this yacht. Hastings glanced at the guests, now scattered across the deck. Clara stood alone at the railing, staring into the dark sea. Mrs. Langley whispered something to Dr. Blake, who nodded gravely. Victor Crane, his cigarette glowing in the night, seemed to watch Clara with an intensity that bordered on obsession. And Mr. Weston, ever the outsider, scribbled notes in a small leather book, his face unreadable. Poirot, Hastings said, you're seeing shadows where there are none. This is a birthday celebration, not a conspiracy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Shadows, Hastings, are where the truth often hides. Mark my words, before this voyage is over, we will see those shadows take form. The night passed without incident, the yacht rocking gently on the waves. Hastings retired to his cabin, his mind buzzing with Poirot's words. He slept fitfully, haunted by dreams of sapphire waves and whispered secrets. When he awoke, the sun was high, and the yacht was anchored off a secluded cove. The guests were already gathering for breakfast on the deck, their voices bright but strained. It was then that the steward's cry shattered the morning calm. Sir Reginald, he's gone. Hastings rushed to the deck, where the guests stood in stunned silence. Sir Reginald's cabin was empty, his bed untouched. A single clue lay on the floor, a sapphire cufflink, its gem glinting coldly in the morning light. Lady Evelyn clutched her daughter's arm, her face pale. Clara's eyes were wide with fear, or perhaps something else. Dr. Blake called for calm, while Mrs. Langley's lips curled in a knowing smile. Victor Crane muttered something about curses, and Mr. Weston's pen scratched furiously in his notebook. Poirot appeared last, his expression serene, but his eyes alight with purpose. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. The cove where the yacht lay anchored was serene, its turquoise waters lapping gently against the hull. But the air was thick with unspoken accusations and nervous glances. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the railing, his heart pounding as he watched Hercule Poirot survey the scene with his characteristic calm. Poirot, impeccable in a light grey suit, despite the warmth, stood at the center of the gathered group, his small stature somehow commanding the attention of all. His mustache twitched slightly as he addressed the guests, his voice steady and precise. Mesdames et messieurs, the situation is grave. Sir Reginald, our host, is not in his cabin, nor has he been seen since last night's dinner. We must proceed methodically. First, we ascertain the facts. Then we uncover the truth. Lady Evelyn Haverford, pale as the sails above, clutched a handkerchief to her lips. This is absurd, she said, her voice trembling. Reginald must be somewhere on the yacht. He cannot simply vanish. Clara Haverford, standing beside her mother, said nothing, but her eyes, wide and dark, betrayed a turmoil that Hastings could not quite decipher. Was it grief, fear, or something more guarded? Dr. Lionel Blake stepped forward, his physician's composure intact. I suggest we search the yacht thoroughly, he said. He may be injured or indisposed. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp eyes glinting, gave a dry laugh. Injured? On a yacht this size? Unless he's tumbled into the sea, I'd wager he's hiding, or someone's hidden him. Her words hung in the air, drawing a gasp from Miss Irene Duval, the French actress, whose delicate hand flew to her throat. Victor Crane, the playwright, leaned against a deck chair, his cigarette dangling lazily. Hiding, Mrs. Langley? Or perhaps spirited away by that cursed sapphire of his? I did warn him last night. Those gems carry old grudges. His tone was theatrical, but his gaze lingered on Clara, who turned away sharply. Mr. Harold Weston, the solicitor, closed his notebook with a snap. Speculation is unproductive, he said curtly. We need facts. When was Sir Reginald last seen, and by whom? Poirot raised a hand for silence. Précisément, monsieur seemed preoccupied, but he was very much alive. Her voice faltered, and Clara placed a hand on her mother's arm. Poirot turned to the others. And you, mes amis? Where were you between 10:30 and midnight? The answers came haltingly. Dr. Blake claimed to have been in his cabin, reading a medical journal until midnight. Mrs. Langley said she had lingered on deck, enjoying the night air until 11:30. Victor Crane admitted to a late-night walk around the yacht, claiming inspiration for a new play. Miss Duval said she had retired early, exhausted from the day's excitement. Mr. Weston, typically precise, stated he had been in the saloon, reviewing legal documents until 11, then went to bed. Philip Marlowe, the young cousin, grinned sheepishly and said he'd been lounging about until midnight, though he offered no specifics. Hastings watched Poirot absorb each response, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to an inner melody. "And you, Mademoiselle Clara?" Poirot asked softly. Clara started, her fingers tightening around her pearl necklace. I was in my cabin after dinner. I didn't see father again." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered toward Victor Crane for a fraction of a second. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Bon. Now we search the yacht. Every cabin, every corner. Monsieur Jenkins, you will assist. Captain Hastings, you will accompany me to Sir Reginald's cabin." The search began with a grim efficiency. The yacht, though luxurious, was compact, its cabins and saloons easily inspected. No trace of Sir Reginald was found, no blood, no signs of struggle, only the sapphire cufflink on his cabin floor, which Poirot pocketed with a thoughtful hum. The cabin itself was a study in opulence, a mahogany desk, a velvet upholstered chair, a small safe in the corner. On the desk lay a half-finished letter, addressed to "My dear Evelyn," but its contents were mundane, a discussion of estate matters. Poirot examined the pen, the ink, the paper, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. "Hastings," he said at last, "observe the desk. The pen is capped, yet the ink is fresh. The letter is unfinished, yet neatly placed. A man interrupted in his writing does not pause to tidy his desk, unless he expects to return." Hastings, authoritative. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "Sir Reginald has not left this yacht. The sea is calm, the boats are accounted for, and the crew reports no unauthorized departures. He is either hidden or dead. We must consider both possibilities." A collective gasp met his words. Miss Duval burst into tears, and Philip Marlowe muttered, "Good Lord." Mrs. Langley's smile was thin. "Dead? That's rather dramatic, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "Drama, madame, is often the mask of truth. Now I will ask each of you to recount your movements last night in greater detail, and do not omit the smallest particular, for it is in the details that the truth resides." The interviews began in the saloon, one by one. Hastings took notes, marveling at Poirot's ability to coax revelations from even the most guarded. Lady Evelyn admitted to a heated exchange with her husband about a financial matter. Dr. Blake revealed he had prescribed Sir Reginald a sedative for insomnia, though the bottle remained unopened. Mrs. Langley hinted at a past disagreement with Sir Reginald over an investment. Victor Crane spoke vaguely of creative tensions, while Miss Duval confessed to a fleeting encounter with Sir Reginald on deck, where he seemed disturbed. Mr. Weston was precise but curt, claiming no knowledge beyond his legal duties. Philip Marlowe, frustratingly vague, said he'd been wandering and saw nothing unusual. Clara was the last. She sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was in my cabin. I heard nothing, saw nothing." Her voice was firm, but her eyes darted to the door. Poirot leaned forward. "Mademoiselle, the heart does not lie, even when the lips do. You are protecting someone, or something. I urge you to speak." Clara's lips parted, then closed. She rose abruptly and left the saloon, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. As the day waned, the yacht remained anchored, its guests trapped in a web of suspicion. Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing down, the sapphire cufflink in Poirot's pocket, a silent accusation. "Poirot," he said quietly, "do you think tense afternoon, with whispered conversations and furtive glances replacing the previous night's gaiety. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the saloon's grand windows, felt the weight of the mystery like a fog rolling in from the sea. Hercule Poirot, however, was in his element. His cream-colored suit remained pristine, his mustache a perfect curve, and his green eyes gleamed with the quiet intensity of a predator stalking elusive prey. He had spent the hours since the search pacing the deck, examining the railings, the lifeboats, and even the polished brass fittings, as if they might whisper secrets to him. Now, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, he gathered the guests in the saloon, his demeanor calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "The disappearance of Sir Reginald is no accident. It is a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, have been called to solve it. But to do so, I require your cooperation. Each of you holds a piece of the truth, whether you know it or not." Lady Evelyn Haverford, seated on a velvet settee, clutched her daughter Clara's hand. Her face was a mask of controlled grief, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but strained, "surely you don't suspect us. Reginald must have fallen overboard or—" Poirot raised a hand. "Non, madame. The sea is calm, the railings high, and the crew vigilant. A fall is unlikely. We must consider other possibilities, deliberate ones." A murmur rippled through the group. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp features accentuated by a black silk dress, leaned forward. "Deliberate? You mean foul play, Monsieur Poirot? That's a bold accusation." Her tone was mocking, but her eyes were wary. "Bold, perhaps," Poirot replied, "but necessary. Let us review the facts. Sir Reginald was last seen by his wife at 11:15 last night. The steward, Monsieur Jenkins, delivered brandy to his cabin at 10:45. No one claims to have seen him after. Yet his bed was untouched, and a single sapphire cufflink lay on the floor, far from his desk. These are not the signs of a man who simply vanished. Dr. Lionel Blake cleared his throat. "As a physician, I must point out that Sir Reginald was in good health, arguing with someone on deck before dinner." A man's voice, sharp and angry. All eyes turned to Crane. Lady Evelyn's face paled further. "Arguing?" she said. "With whom?" Crane shrugged, his eyes flicking to Clara. "Couldn't tell. The wind carried the words away. But it was heated." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Merci, Monsieur Crane. This is most interesting. We must establish where each of you was at the time of this argument. Let us say, between 8 and 9 o'clock last night. The alibis came quickly, some too quickly. Dr. Blake claimed to have been in the saloon, discussing medical literature with Mr. Weston. Mrs. Langley said she was in her cabin, writing letters. Miss Irene Duval, the actress, said she was practicing lines on the lower deck, alone. Philip Marlowe, the young cousin, grinned and admitted to sampling the ship's excellent whiskey in the bar. Mr. Weston confirmed his conversation with Dr. Blake, though his tone was curt. Clara said she was in her cabin, preparing for dinner. Lady Evelyn, hesitating, said she was with her husband in their private suite, but they parted before 8. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his fingers steepled. Hastings, taking notes, marveled at how Poirot seemed to hear not just the words, but the silences between them. When the interviews concluded, Poirot dismissed the guests, save for Jenkins, whom he beckoned to stay. "Monsieur Jenkins," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm, "you are the eyes and ears of this yacht. Tell me, what did you see last night, beyond the brandy delivery?" Jenkins shifted, his hands clasped tightly. "Nothing unusual, sir. The guests were lively, as you'd expect at a party. But I did notice Sir Reginald seemed out of sorts. He kept looking at his watch, as if waiting for something. And this argument Monsieur Crane mentioned," Poirot pressed. Jenkins hesitated. "I didn't hear it myself, sir, but I saw Sir Reginald on deck around 8, talking to someone. I couldn't see who, it was dark, and I was below, fetching supplies." Poirot nodded. "Merci. You may go." As Jenkins departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. "This is getting murkier by the minute, Poirot. An argument, a cufflink." Stood, brushing his hands. "Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells, they work. Let us now examine the safe." The small safe in the corner was locked, but Jenkins, summoned again, provided the key at Lady Evelyn's reluctant permission. Inside were papers, deeds, contracts, and a will, all in order. But Poirot's eyes lingered on a single sheet, a letter addressed to "My dear Clara." It was brief, written in Sir Reginald's bold hand. "Forgive me, my darling. I have made mistakes, but I will make them right. Trust no one until I return." Poirot handed the letter to Hastings. "Curieux, non? A man writes to his daughter, urging secrecy, yet leaves the letter in plain sight. Why?" Hastings shook his head. "It's almost as if he wanted it found." "Précisément," Poirot said. "And that, mon ami, is what makes this disappearance so very interesting." As evening fell, the guests dined in strained silence, the absence of their host a palpable void. Poirot, seated at the table, observed each face, his eyes missing nothing. Clara toyed with her food, her gaze distant. Mrs. Langley's sharp remarks were fewer, her attention fixed on Victor Crane, who seemed unusually subdued. Dr. Blake and Mr. Weston exchanged hushed words, while Miss Duval's laughter rang hollow. Philip Marlowe, ever the charmer, tried to lighten the mood, but his jests fell flat. After dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Tomorrow we deepen our inquiries," he said. "But tonight, Hastings, watch. The guilty, they cannot hide forever. A gesture, a word, a look, it will betray them." As the yacht rocked gently in the cove, Hastings felt the mystery tightening around them, a net of secrets waiting to be untangled. Poirot, with his unerring logic, was already weaving the threads together, but the truth remained elusive, shimmering like the sapphire cufflink in the detective's pocket. The sapphire yacht remained anchored in the tranquil cove, its pristine decks now a stage for suspicion and unease. The second day of Sir Reginald Haverford's disappearance dawned with a heavy mist, cloaking the vessel in a ghostly veil that mirrored the uncertainty among its passengers. The saloon, with its mahogany paneling and crystal chandeliers, Poirot gathered the guests once more. The atmosphere was taut, the previous night's strained dinner still fresh in their minds. Lady Evelyn sat rigidly, her face pale but composed, her fingers entwined with Clara's. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her black silk dress as sharp as her tongue, watched Poirot with a mixture of amusement and wariness. Victor Crane, the playwright, slouched in a chair, his cigarette smoke curling upward like a question mark. Miss Irene Duval, the actress, fidgeted with a silk scarf, her eyes darting to the door. Philip Marlowe, the young cousin, leaned against a wall, his easy charm dimmed by the gravity of the situation. Dr. Blake and Mr. Weston sat apart, their expressions unreadable but their postures tense. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The disappearance of Sir Reginald is no mere accident. It is a deliberate act, and the truth lies hidden among you. Today we will explore your stories further, for it is in the contradictions, the hesitations, that the little grey cells find their path." Lady Evelyn's lips tightened. "Monsieur Poirot, this is intolerable. My husband is missing, and you treat us like criminals." Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Madame, I seek only the truth. To find Sir Reginald, we must uncover what each of you knows, or conceals. Let us begin with the evening of the disappearance. I wish to hear, in precise detail, your movements after dinner." The interviews commenced, each guest summoned to a private corner of the saloon, where Poirot sat, his notebook open, his pen poised. Hastings stood nearby, his own notes growing ever more detailed as he marveled at Poirot's ability to coax revelations from even the most reluctant. Dr. Blake went first, his manner calm but guarded. "As I said, I was in my cabin after dinner, reading until midnight. I saw no one, heard nothing unusual." When Poirot pressed him about the sedative prescribed to Sir Reginald, Blake admitted he hadn't taken it in days. He said it made him feel sluggish, but he was agitated the last time we spoke. "Agitated about what, doctor?" Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing. "Briefly, around 8, arguing with someone near the stern." I couldn't hear the words, but his face was red with anger. When Poirot asked if he recognized the other party, Crane shook his head, though his eyes flickered toward Clara. Miss Duval, trembling slightly, recounted her early retirement. I was in my cabin by 10, practicing lines. I heard nothing, saw nothing. But under Poirot's gentle probing, she admitted to a brief encounter with Sir Reginald at 9:30 on deck. He seemed distracted. He asked me if I'd seen Clara. I hadn't. Mr. Weston, ever precise, reiterated his alibi. In the saloon until 11, then to bed. I had no reason to see Sir Reginald after dinner, he said curtly. My work for him was done. But Poirot noted the solicitor's fingers tightening around his pen, a subtle sign of unease. Philip Marlowe, with his boyish grin, was frustratingly vague. I was about, enjoying the party. Drank a bit, chatted a bit. Didn't see Sir Reginald after dinner. His nonchalance grated on Hastings, but Poirot merely nodded, his expression unreadable. Clara was last, her composure fraying at the edges. I was in my cabin, she insisted, her voice tight. I didn't see father after dinner. I don't know what happened to him. When Poirot mentioned the letter found in the safe, her eyes widened. He wrote to me. I didn't know. Poirot leaned forward. Mademoiselle, the letter urges you to trust no one. Why would your father write such a thing? Clara's hands twisted in her lap. I don't know. He was worried about something. Business, perhaps, or... She trailed off, her gaze dropping. Poirot dismissed her gently, then turned to Hastings. Mon ami, what do you make of these alibis? Hastings frowned. They're all so tidy. Too tidy, perhaps. And that letter, it's as if Sir Reginald knew something was coming. Précisément, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The letter is a clue, but also a distraction. It was meant to be found, I think, but by whom, and why? Poirot's next move was to examine the yacht's log with Jenkins, the steward. The log confirmed no boats had left the yacht, and the crew's quarters were accounted for. But Poirot lingered over a notation. Lured him out? Or worse? Poirot stood, brushing his hands. I think, mon ami, that Sir Reginald was not alone in this cabin after 11. The cufflink, the letter, the scuff mark, they tell a story, but not the whole one. Dinner that evening was a somber affair, the guests' appetites dulled by suspicion. Poirot observed silently, his eyes darting from face to face. Clara avoided Victor Crane's gaze, while Mrs. Langley whispered something to Dr. Blake, who shook his head. Philip Marlowe, unusually quiet, toyed with his wineglass. Lady Evelyn excused herself early, claiming a headache. As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Tomorrow, we set a small trap, he said softly. The guilty, they grow careless under pressure. We must apply it carefully. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The sapphire yacht was a gilded cage, and within it, a secret waited to be uncovered. Poirot, with his relentless logic, was closing in, but the truth remained just out of reach, shimmering like the sea beyond. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The third morning aboard the sapphire yacht dawned with a restless energy, the mist of the previous day giving way to a clear sky that did little to lift the oppressive mood. The cove, with its crystalline waters and jagged cliffs, seemed to mock the turmoil aboard the vessel. Sir Reginald Haverford's disappearance remained unsolved, and the guests' polished facades were beginning to crack under the strain of Hercule Poirot's relentless scrutiny. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing at the saloon's window, felt the mystery coiling tighter, each new revelation adding layers to an already intricate puzzle. Hercule Poirot, his grey suit as immaculate as ever, moved with the quiet confidence of a chess master positioning his pieces. His interviews the previous day had stirred the waters, and now he sensed the time was ripe to cast suspicion in a new direction. Today, Hastings, he said, his voice low as they stood on the deck. We observe the red herrings. The guilty, they always seek to mislead, but in their deception, they reveal themselves. Hastings frowned, clutching his notebook. Red herrings? You mean someone's deliberately throwing us off? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, mon ami. The discovery sent a ripple through the guests when Poirot presented it in the saloon. Lady Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her throat. That's Reginald's. He never parted with it. Oh, this is proof he's been taken, or worse. Mrs. Beatrice Langley's eyes narrowed. Or proof he left in a hurry, Lady Evelyn. People don't abandon their valuables without reason. Her tone was sharp, and Hastings noted the way her gaze flicked toward Philip Marlowe, who stood near the door, his usual grin absent. Clara Haverford, pale and silent, stared at the cigarette case as if it were a ghost. "Father always kept it in his pocket," she said softly. He said it was a gift from his father." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Indeed, mademoiselle. And yet, it was found in a lifeboat, a place Sir Reginald had no reason to visit. Who among you was near the lifeboats last night?" The question hung in the air, met with uneasy silence. Philip Marlowe spoke first, his voice casual but strained. "I told you I was wandering about after dinner. I might have passed the lifeboats, but I didn't see anything odd." His eyes darted to Jenkins, who looked away. Victor Crane stubbed out his cigarette. "You seem awfully quick to admit that, Marlowe. Trying to get ahead of the story?" His tone was mocking, but his hands trembled slightly. Poirot raised a hand. "Enough, messieurs. The cigarette case is a clue, yes, but it is also a distraction. Let us turn to another matter, the argument Monsieur Crane overheard on deck before dinner. We must identify Sir Reginald's companion." The guests exchanged glances, some guarded, others openly suspicious. Dr. Lionel Blake cleared his throat. "I was in the saloon at that time, as I said. I heard no argument." Mr. Weston nodded in agreement, his face impassive. Miss Irene Duval, however, hesitated. I may have seen something," she said, her French accent thickening with nerves. "Around 8, I was on the lower deck, practicing my lines. I saw Sir Reginald near the stern, talking to a man. I couldn't see who, it was too dark, but their voices were raised." Poirot's eyes locked onto hers. "A man, mademoiselle, you are certain?" She nodded, then faltered. "Well, I think so. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered," she said. "But he wouldn't tell me more." When Poirot questioned Philip Marlowe about his proximity to the lifeboats, the young man grew defensive. "Look, I was just helping Jenkins with the supplies earlier that evening. I didn't go near the lifeboats after dinner. Ask him." Jenkins, when summoned, confirmed Marlowe's help with the supply boat, but added, "He was on deck longer than necessary, sir. Kept looking towards Sir Reginald's cabin." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Interesting. And you, Monsieur Crane, why did you not mention seeing Mademoiselle Clara near the stern that evening?" Crane started, his cigarette nearly falling. "I didn't, I wasn't sure it was her. It was dark and I was distracted." Clara's head snapped up. "I was in my cabin, Monsieur Poirot. I told you that." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Of course, mademoiselle. But the truth, it has a way of shifting like the sea." By midday, the guests were visibly rattled, their alibis fraying under Poirot's relentless logic. Hastings, scribbling furiously, whispered, "Poirot, this cigarette case, it's too obvious, isn't it? Someone planted it to make us think Sir Reginald tried to escape." Poirot nodded. "A red herring, Hastings, as I suspected. But it tells us something vital. The guilty party wishes us to believe Sir Reginald left the yacht. Why? To divert suspicion, or to conceal a darker truth?" In the afternoon, Poirot turned his attention to the yacht's physical evidence. He examined the lifeboat where the cigarette case was found, noting its pristine condition, no signs of use, no disturbed ropes. "If Sir Reginald took a lifeboat," he said, "he left no trace, and that, mon ami, is impossible." He then returned to Sir Reginald's cabin, where he studied the scuff mark and the sapphire cufflink anew. "The cufflink," he mused. "It matches the cigarette case in its deliberateness. Both are items Sir Reginald cherished, yet both were left behind. It is as if someone wishes to tell a story of flight or of foul play." Hastings frowned. "But who benefits, Poirot? Lady Evelyn inherits, I suppose, but she seems genuinely distraught. Clara, too. And Marlowe, he's family, but he's got no clear motive." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Messieurs, tomorrow I will ask you to gather again. There is a question I have not yet asked, and its answer will bring us closer to the truth. Until then, I advise you to reflect on what you know and what you hide." The guests dispersed, their footsteps heavy. Hastings turned to Poirot. "You're rattling them, Poirot. But are we any closer to finding Sir Reginald?" Poirot's smile was faint but confident. We are, mon ami. The red herrings, they lead us to the truth by showing us what is false. Tomorrow, we tighten the net. As the yacht rocked gently in the cove, Hastings felt the mystery's weight, the cigarette case and cufflink gleaming in his mind like false stars, guiding them toward an unseen truth. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The sapphire yacht lay cradled in the cove's gentle embrace, its polished decks gleaming under the midday sun of the third day since Sir Reginald Haverford's disappearance. The air was heavy with salt and suspicion, the guests' polite facades now threadbare under the strain of Hercule Poirot's probing inquiries. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the saloon's grand windows, felt the mystery tightening like a noose, each new clue a knot that promised to unravel the truth or strangle them in deception. Hercule Poirot, his linen suit pristine despite the mounting tension, moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his green eyes alight with purpose. The discovery of Sir Reginald's cigarette case in the lifeboat had stirred the guests, but Poirot was not content to chase shadows. "Today, Hastings," he murmured as they stood on the deck, "we find the clue that pierces the veil. The smallest detail, mon ami, it is often the key to the whole." Hastings clutched his notebook, his brow furrowed. "The cigarette case and the cufflink, they're too obvious, aren't they? Someone's playing a game with us." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A game, oui, but one in which the player reveals more than they intend. Come, we return to Sir Reginald's cabin. There is something we have overlooked." The cabin, with its mahogany desk and velvet chair, was as they had left it, save for the faint scent of polish that lingered in the air. Poirot knelt by the scuff mark near the door, his magnifying glass glinting. "We found no such thing. Could it be connected to the cufflink?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami. Or perhaps it is another piece of the puzzle. Sir Reginald, he buys a costly gift, yet it is not among his possessions. Where is it? And for whom was it intended?" Poirot pocketed the receipt and turned his attention to the safe, which Jenkins had opened the previous day. Among the papers, he found a small ledger, its entries meticulous but cryptic. One line caught his eye. "CD, 10,000, due 1st September. Poirot's brow furrowed. "CD, he murmured. "Clara? Or another? And this sum, it is significant." Hastings leaned over. "A debt, perhaps? Or a payment for something else?" Poirot closed the ledger. "We shall see. But first we speak to Mademoiselle Clara. She holds a key, whether she knows it or not." Clara Haverford was summoned to the saloon, where Poirot awaited her with a gentleness that belied his intent. She sat, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her hands clasped in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but her eyes wary. "I've told you everything. I was in my cabin that night." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft. "Mademoiselle, let us speak of your father. He wrote you a letter, urging you to trust no one. He bought a sapphire pendant, yet it is missing. And now, a ledger suggests a payment to someone with the initials CD. What do you know of these matters?" Clara's face paled, her fingers tightening. "A pendant? I know nothing of it. And CD, I don't know who that could be." Her voice trembled, and Hastings noted the way her eyes darted to the door, as if expecting someone to enter. Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "Mademoiselle, the truth is a fragile thing, but it cannot be hidden forever. If you protect someone, you risk more than you know." Clara rose abruptly, her lips pressed tight. "I have nothing to hide," she said, and left the saloon, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Poirot turned to Hastings. "She knows something, Hastings, but fear holds her tongue. We must apply pressure, but carefully." "The fabric," she said sharply. "You're quick to point fingers, Monsieur Crane." Poirot's smile was faint. "No accusations, mademoiselle, merely questions. But this fabric, it tells a story. Someone was near the lifeboat, someone who did not wish to be seen." The guests dispersed, their unease palpable. Hastings whispered to Poirot, "That fabric, it could belong to anyone. Or it could be another plant, like the cigarette case." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but it is too specific, too delicate. It is a clue, Hastings, not a herring. We must match it to its source." That evening, Poirot requested a private word with Lady Evelyn. She met him in the saloon, her composure fraying. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "this is unbearable. My husband is missing, and you hound us with questions." Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "Madame, I seek only to find him. Tell me, what was the nature of your discussion with Sir Reginald at 11:15? You said he was preoccupied. About what?" Lady Evelyn hesitated, her eyes glistening. He spoke of a mistake he'd made, years ago. Something about a business partner he'd wronged. He said he was trying to make amends, but he wouldn't say more." Poirot nodded. "And this pendant, did he mention it?" She shook her head. "No, he never spoke of gifts. Reginald was not a sentimental man." As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "A mistake, a pendant, a payment to CD. The threads, they begin to weave together. But we need one more clue to see the pattern." Dinner was a somber affair, the guests' conversations stilted. Clara avoided Victor Crane's gaze, while Mrs. Langley watched Poirot with a calculating air. Dr. Blake and Mr. Weston spoke in low tones, their heads bent together. Philip Marlowe, unusually subdued, excused himself early, claiming fatigue. Miss Duval's laughter was forced, her eyes darting to the door. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, tomorrow I will ask a question that will shake the foundations of this mystery. I urge you to reflect on your secrets, for they will not remain hidden much longer." The guests departed, their footsteps heavy. Hastings turned to Poirot. "Your push." Suspicion brewing among the guests. The disappearance of Sir Reginald Haverford had cast a shadow over the vessel, and Hercule Poirot's relentless inquiries were peeling back layers of deceit, exposing raw nerves and hidden truths. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the deck with his notebook, felt the mystery's weight like a physical burden, each clue a step closer to the truth, or a deeper descent into deception. Hercule Poirot, his grey suit as pristine as ever, his moustache a perfect curve, moved with the calm assurance of a man who knew the game was nearing its climax. The discovery of the sapphire pendant receipt and the torn fabric had sharpened his focus, and he was now determined to uncover the secrets that lay beneath the guests' carefully crafted alibis. "Today, Hastings," he said, his voice low as they stood in the saloon, "we expose the lies. The guilty, they weave a web, but it is fragile, and it will break under scrutiny." Hastings nodded, his pen poised. "That fabric and the receipt, they're pointing to someone specific, aren't they? But who?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it reveals itself in the contradictions. Let us begin with a new approach." Poirot gathered the guests in the saloon, the air thick with tension. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat rigidly, her face pale, her hands clutching a lace handkerchief. Clara Haverford, beside her, stared at the floor, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her expression guarded. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp eyes glinting, watched Poirot with a mixture of defiance and curiosity. Victor Crane, the playwright, smoked incessantly, his hands trembling slightly. Miss Irene Duval, the actress, twisted her scarf, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Lionel Blake and Mr. Harold Weston sat apart, their faces impassive, but their postures tense. Philip Marlowe, the young cousin, leaned against a wall, his usual charm replaced by a wary silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "we have uncovered clues, the cigarette case, the cufflink, the fabric, the receipt for a sapphire pendant. But clues alone do not tell the story. It is the lies, the omissions that speak loudest. Today, I ask you to reconsider your accounts of the night Sir Reginald vanished." "Spoke of personal matters. I left his cabin, and that was the last I saw of him." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Personal matters, madame? You mentioned a mistake he wished to amend. Was it related to this CD?" Her eyes widened. "I don't know any CD. He didn't mention a name." Poirot turned to Clara. "And you, mademoiselle? Your father wrote to you, urging secrecy? Did he speak of this pendant or this debt?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I knew nothing of a pendant or any debt. Father was distant lately, but he told me nothing specific." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered toward Victor Crane, who looked away. Poirot's attention shifted to Crane. "Monsieur Crane, you overheard an argument before dinner. You suggested it was with a man, yet Mademoiselle Duval saw Sir Reginald with a tall figure. Could it have been a woman? Perhaps in a man's coat?" Crane's cigarette paused mid-air. I suppose it's possible. It was dark. I only assumed it was a man because of the voice, low, angry." His eyes darted to Clara, then back to Poirot. A new voice broke the tension. Miss Duval, her face flushed, stood abruptly. "I can't bear this anymore," she cried, her accent thickening with emotion. "I lied, Monsieur Poirot. I did see Sir Reginald that night, not just at 9:30 but later, near 11. He was on deck, arguing with someone, a woman, I think. I heard her voice, sharp and low. I didn't want to say before because I was afraid." The saloon fell silent, all eyes on the actress. Lady Evelyn gasped, and Clara's face drained of colour. Mrs. Langley's smile was thin and knowing. "Afraid, my dear?" she said. "Or protecting someone?" Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle Duval, this is most important. Who was this woman?" Miss Duval shook her head, tears welling. "I couldn't see her face. She wore a dark coat, and it was too dark to tell more. But Sir Reginald was furious. He said something about betrayal." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your honesty, it brings us
Was busy below decks after 10. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet the fabric we found, it is from a fine coat, perhaps one worn by a guest. We must examine your wardrobes, mesdames et messieurs." The suggestion drew protests, but Poirot was insistent. With Jenkins's help, he inspected the guests' cabins, focusing on their outerwear. In Mrs. Langley's cabin, he found a dark blue coat with a small tear at the hem, matching the fabric from the lifeboat. "Madame," he said, holding it up, "this is yours, n'est-ce pas?" Mrs. Langley's smile was icy. "It is, but I haven't worn it since we boarded. Someone could have taken it, or planted that fabric." Poirot nodded. "Possible, madame, but the truth, it does not hide forever." The day's revelations left the guests rattled, their secrets spilling like wine from a cracked glass. Dinner was a tense affair, the clink of cutlery the only sound. Clara avoided eye contact, her hands trembling as she sipped her water. Victor Crane drank heavily, his gaze fixed on the table. Mrs. Langley's sharp remarks were absent, her eyes locked on Poirot. Dr. Blake and Mr. Weston exchanged hushed words, while Miss Duval's face was streaked with tears. Philip Marlowe's attempts at levity were met with silence. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the gloom. "Mesdames et messieurs, the lies are surfacing, but the truth remains just below. Tomorrow, I will ask a question that will force the guilty to reveal themselves. Reflect on your actions, for the net is closing." The guests dispersed, their footsteps heavy. Hastings turned to Poirot. "That coat, Poirot, it points to Mrs. Langley, but it's too neat, isn't it? Another red herring." Poirot's smile was faint. "Perhaps, mon ami, or perhaps it is a truth disguised as a lie. The pendant, the fabric, the argument, they are threads in a tapestry. Tomorrow, we weave them together." As the yacht swayed in the cove, Hastings felt the mystery's pulse quickening, the lies piling like driftwood, ready to ignite under Poirot's relentless logic. Row-lined Miss Duval's tearful admission of an overheard argument had tightened the web of suspicion. Poirot sensed that the moment was ripe for a breakthrough. "Today, Hastings," he murmured as they stood in the saloon, "we reach the heart of the matter. The guilty, they cannot hide their emotions forever. A crack will appear, and through it, we will see the truth." Hastings clutched his pen, his brow furrowed. "Miss Duval's confession yesterday, it shook everyone. And that coat of Mrs. Langley's, do you think she's involved, or is someone framing her?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The coat, the confession, these are threads, mon ami, but the truth lies in what is felt, not just what is seen. Let us press gently, and the heart will speak." Poirot gathered the guests in the saloon, the crystal chandeliers casting soft light over their strained faces. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat with her hands clasped tightly, her face a mask of grief tinged with fear. Clara Haverford beside her stared at her lap, her fingers twisting the pearl necklace she always wore.
Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp features accentuated by a navy dress, watched Poirot with a guarded intensity. Victor Crane, the playwright, smoked nervously, his eyes darting to Clara. Miss Irene Duval, her face pale, clutched a handkerchief, her earlier tears replaced by a fragile resolve. Dr. Lionel Blake and Mr. Harold Weston sat apart, their expressions unreadable, but their postures rigid. Philip Marlowe, the young cousin, leaned against a wall, his usual charm replaced by a tense silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and commanding, "we have uncovered much, clues, lies and half-truths. The cigarette case, the cufflink, the torn fabric, the pendant receipt, all point to a deliberate act. But it is the human heart that betrays the guilty. Today I ask you to speak not only of what you did, but of what you felt on the night Sir Reginald vanished." The request drew uneasy murmurs. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice trembling. "I felt despair," she said. "Reginald was distant, consumed by some worry he wouldn't share. When we spoke at 11:15, he seemed resolved, as if he'd made a decision. I thought he was planning to leave me."
Something terrible. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away toward Victor Crane, who stiffened. Poirot's voice softened. "Betrayed, mademoiselle? By whom?" Clara shook her head, her lips pressed tight. "I don't know, I felt alone." The air grew heavier as Poirot turned to Miss Duval. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of an argument you overheard, a woman's voice, sharp and low. What did you feel when you heard it?" Miss Duval's hands twisted her handkerchief. "I felt afraid," she admitted. "Sir Reginald's voice was so angry, and the woman, she sounded desperate, almost pleading. I didn't want to get involved, so I hid. I'm ashamed of it now." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. Mrs. Langley's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, this is becoming a melodrama. Are we to bare our souls next? I felt nothing but boredom that night. Too much champagne, not enough excitement." Her eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot's smile was faint. "Boredom, madame? Yet your coat was torn and its fabric found near the lifeboat. What do you feel about that?" Mrs. Langley's smile faltered. "I feel someone is trying to make me look guilty. I haven't worn that coat since we boarded. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot nodded, turning to Victor Crane. "And you, monsieur? You overheard an argument, yet you hesitate to name the other party. What did you feel?" Crane stubbed out his cigarette, his hands shaking. "I felt curious," he said, his voice low. "Sir Reginald was furious, and I wanted to know why. But I kept my distance. I'm not a fool." His eyes flicked to Clara, then away. Dr. Blake, when questioned, spoke of professional detachment. "I felt concern for Sir Reginald," he said. "He was under strain, but he refused my advice. I felt helpless, if I'm honest." His tone was steady, but his fingers gripped his chair. Mr. Weston was curt. "I felt nothing out of the ordinary. My work for Sir Reginald was routine. I had no reason to feel otherwise." Yet his eyes avoided Poirot's, and Hastings noted the slight tremor in his hand. Philip Marlowe, last to speak, shrugged. "I felt like I was at a grand party."
"Now,"
She choked on a sob and fled the saloon, Lady Evelyn hurrying after her. The guests sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed, and Victor Crane lit another cigarette, his hands trembling. Poirot's expression remained serene, but his eyes burned with purpose. "A crack, Hastings," he whispered. "The heart has spoken, and now we are close." After the guests dispersed, Poirot and Hastings returned to Sir Reginald's cabin. Poirot examined the ledger again, focusing on the CD entry. "Clara, perhaps," he mused. "But why the secrecy? And the pendant, where is it?" Hastings frowned. Clara's outburst, it felt genuine. But could she be hiding something more? Poirot nodded. "She knows more than she says, but her fear is real. The threat she mentioned, it is the key. We must find who held this power over Sir Reginald." Dinner that evening was a strained affair, Clara's absence casting a pall over the table. Lady Evelyn returned alone, her face drawn, saying only that her daughter needed rest. Mrs. Langley's remarks were few, her gaze fixed on Poirot. Victor Crane drank heavily, his eyes haunted. Dr. Blake and Mr. Weston spoke in low tones, while Miss Duval's silence was heavy with guilt. Philip Marlowe's attempts at levity were met with cold stares. As the meal ended, Poirot rose.
Tomorrow, mesdames et messieurs, we will gather again. The truth is near, and it will not be denied. Reflect on your secrets, for they are no longer safe. The guests departed, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Hastings turned to Poirot. Clara's confession, it changes everything, doesn't it? Poirot's smile was faint but confident. It changes the angle, mon ami, but not the truth. The heart has spoken, and tomorrow we will hear its final word. As the yacht rocked in the cove, Hastings felt the mystery's pulse quickening, Clara's outburst a beacon in the fog, guiding them toward a truth that was both closer and more dangerous than ever. Chapter 9. The Trap. The sixth day aboard the Sapphire yacht dawned with a deceptive calm, the cove's tranquil waters reflecting a sky streaked with clouds. The disappearance of Sir Reginald Haverford had stretched the guests' nerves to their breaking point, and Clara Haverford's emotional outburst the previous day had left a raw wound in the torn fabric, the pendant receipt, and the cryptic ledger entry for CD were beginning to form a pattern in Poirot's mind. "Today, Hastings," he said, his voice low as they stood in the saloon, "we set the trap. The guilty, they grow careless under pressure, and we will use that to our advantage." Hastings gripped his pen, his brow furrowed. "A trap, Poirot? What do you mean? Are you going to confront someone directly?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not confront, mon ami, but provoke. The guilty will reveal themselves when they believe their secret is at risk. We must create a moment of crisis, and the truth will slip through the cracks." Poirot announced to the guests that he would hold a special gathering that evening in the saloon, promising a revelation that will shed light on Sir Reginald's fate. The announcement sent a ripple of unease through the group, their faces betraying a mix of curiosity and dread. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her composure fraying, clutched her handkerchief tightly. Clara, pale and subdued after her outburst, avoided eye contact, her fingers toying with her pearl necklace. Mrs. Beatrice Langley's sharp smile was tinged with wariness, while Victor Crane lit another cigarette, his hands trembling. Miss Irene Duval, her eyes red-rimmed, seemed on the verge of collapse. Dr. Lionel Blake and Mr. Harold Weston exchanged guarded glances, their expressions unreadable. Philip Marlowe, his usual levity gone, watched Poirot with a tense curiosity. Throughout the day, Poirot moved with purpose, revisiting the clues with meticulous care. He examined the torn fabric from Mrs. Langley's coat, confirming its match with the piece found near the lifeboat. He studied the sapphire pendant receipt, noting its date and the jeweller's address in London. The ledger entry for CD drew his attention again, and he cross-referenced it with Sir Reginald's financial papers, finding a pattern of payments to an unnamed party over several months. A debt, perhaps, Poirot mused, or a price for silence. But whose silence? Hastings followed, scribbling notes. This CD, could it be Clara, or someone else entirely? And the pendant, where is it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The pendant, Hastings, is the key. It was bought for someone, but not found among Sir Reginald's possessions. Either it was taken, done, years ago, but he never named anyone. I thought it was business, not personal. Poirot nodded. And the pendant, did he ever speak of it? She shook her head. No, he wasn't one for gifts. If he bought it, it was for someone else. Her voice broke, and she looked away. The gathering in the saloon was a tense affair, the guests seated in a semicircle under the chandelier's soft glow. Poirot stood at the center, his small stature commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "we are close to the truth of Sir Reginald's disappearance. Tonight I will reveal a discovery that will shake this mystery to its core. But first I must ask, where is the sapphire pendant Sir Reginald purchased before this voyage?" The question hung in the air, drawing gasps and exchanged glances. Clara's hand flew to her necklace, her face paling. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed, while Victor Crane's cigarette paused mid-air. Miss Duval clutched her scarf, her breath hitching. Poirot held up the receipt. This pendant, valued at a significant sum, was bought for someone, yet it is not among Sir Reginald's possessions. I believe it is here, on this yacht, with one of you. A silence followed, broken by Mrs. Langley's sharp laugh. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, you think one of us is hiding a jewel? This is absurd." Poirot's gaze was unwavering.
Not absurd, madame. The pendant is a symbol, a gift, a bribe, or a debt repaid, and it is connected to the initials CD in Sir Reginald's ledger. Who among you knows of this? Clara stood suddenly, her voice trembling. Stop it. I can't bear this. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch, tossing it onto the table. It opened, revealing a sparkling sapphire pendant, its deep blue catching the light. Father gave it to me the day before we sailed. He said it was for my future, but I didn't understand. I didn't want to tell anyone. It felt wrong. The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Clara, why didn't you say? Clara's eyes filled with tears. He told me to keep it secret. He said someone might try to take it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. It is clear. Someone on this yacht threatened Sir Reginald, and the pendant was part of the equation. Who else knows of CD? Miss Duval burst into tears. It's me, she cried, her voice raw. CD, it's me, Celeste Duval. Sir Reginald owed me money from years ago when he ruined my family in a business deal. He promised to make it right, but he never did, until this voyage. He gave me a letter, promising payment, but then he vanished. The revelation stunned the room. Lady Evelyn's face drained of colour, and Clara stared at Miss Duval, her eyes wide. Mrs. Langley's smile was thin and knowing, while Dr. Blake and Mr. Weston exchanged uneasy glances. Philip Marlowe's jaw tightened, his hands clenched. Poirot nodded. Merci, Mademoiselle Duval. Your courage brings us closer. But the pendant, the argument, the torn fabric, they point to more than a debt. Someone acted that night, and I will find them. As the guests dispersed, their faces ashen, Hastings turned to Poirot. Clara and Miss Duval, both tied to Sir Reginald's secrets, but who's the guilty one? Poirot's smile was faint. The trap, Hastings, has been set. The guilty, they are nervous now. Tomorrow we spring it. As the yacht rocked in the cove, Hastings felt the mystery's pulse racing, the pendant and Miss Duval's confession shining like beacons, drawing them ever closer to a dangerous truth. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The seventh day aboard the Sapphire yacht dawned with a charged stillness, the cove's tranquil waters reflecting a sky heavy with impending rain. The disappearance of Sir Reginald Haverford had reached its climax, and the guests, worn by days of suspicion and Hercule Poirot's unrelenting pressure, were on edge. Clara Haverford's revelation of the sapphire pendant and Miss Irene Duval's confession as CD had shattered the last remnants of their composure, exposing a web of secrets that now demanded resolution. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the saloon with his notebook, felt the mystery's weight like a storm about to break, its truth tantalizingly close. Hercule Poirot, his pale grey suit pristine, his moustache a perfect arc, stood with the calm assurance of a maestro about to conduct his final symphony. The clues, the saph polished. Let us gather the players and show them the light. The saloon was a stage of tension, its chandeliers casting soft shadows over the assembled guests. Lady Evelyn Haverford sat rigidly, her face pale, her hands clutching a handkerchief. Clara beside her stared at the floor, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace. Mrs. Beatrice Langley's sharp eyes watched Poirot with a mix of defiance and unease. Victor Crane, the playwright, smoked nervously, his hands trembling. Miss Irene Duval, her face streaked with tears, sat hunched, her earlier confession weighing heavily. Dr. Lionel Blake and Mr. Harold Weston sat apart, their expressions guarded. Philip Marlowe, his usual charm gone, leaned against a wall, his jaw tight. Jenkins, the steward, stood by the door, his face a mask of quiet observation. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. The disappearance of Sir Reginald Haverford is no accident, no simple flight. It is a crime, meticulously planned, and the truth lies among you. Let us reconstruct the night of his vanishing, step by step, and reveal the guilty. The guests shifted uneasily, their eyes fixed on Poirot. He held up the sapphire cufflink. We begin with this, a cufflink, found far from Sir Reginald's desk near the door. It suggests haste, perhaps a struggle. Then the cigarette case,
found in the lifeboat, scratched as if thrown. A red herring, meant to imply Sir Reginald fled. But why leave such cherished items? He produced the torn fabric. This, from Madame Langley's coat, found near the lifeboat. A clue or another distraction? And the receipt for a sapphire pendant given to Mademoiselle Clara, a gift shrouded in secrecy. Finally, the ledger entry for C.D., Mademoiselle Duval, who admitted to a debt owed by Sir Reginald. These clues, they tell a story, but it is the human heart that completes it. Poirot paced slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. Let us return to the night of the disappearance. Sir Reginald was last seen by Lady Evelyn at 11:15, in his cabin, preoccupied. Mademoiselle Duval overheard an argument near 11, with a woman's voice. Monsieur Crane heard an earlier argument, before. But when he vanished, I thought he'd tricked me again. Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor Crane. Monsieur Crane, you overheard an argument, yet you hesitated to name the other party. Why? Crane's cigarette trembled. I didn't want to accuse without proof. It was dark and I only saw shapes, but I think it was Clara with him before dinner. Clara gasped. That's a lie. I was in my cabin. Poirot raised a hand. Calm, mademoiselle. Let us consider the timeline. Sir Reginald was alive at 11:15. By morning he was gone, his bed untouched. The scuff mark in his cabin with black polish suggests another was there. The pendant, the fabric, the cigarette case, all point to a plan, but whose? He turned to Mrs. Langley. Madam, your coat was torn, its fabric found near the lifeboat. You claim it was taken. By whom? Mrs. Langley's smile was thin. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot, but I'm not the only one with secrets here. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Indeed. And now the truth. He paused, letting the silence build. Sir Reginald did not vanish of his own accord. He was murdered here on this yacht, and his body hidden to conceal the crime. A collective gasp filled the room. Lady Evelyn cried out, and Clara buried her face in her hands. Poirot continued, his voice relentless. The murderer acted after 11:15, luring Sir Reginald from his cabin. The scuff mark suggests a brief struggle, the cufflink a deliberate clue. The cigarette case was placed in the lifeboat to suggest flight, and the pendant given to Mademoiselle Clara to confuse the motive. But the ledger entry, C.D., it was not about Mademoiselle Duval. He turned to Dr. Blake. Doctor, your initials are L.B., but you treated a patient years ago, under Sir Reginald's orders, a patient whose initials were C.D., a man he wronged, whose death he caused indirectly. You knew of this, did you not? Dr. Blake's face paled. I treated many patients. I don't recall. Poirot's voice sharpened. You recall, Doctor, and you were seen near Sir Reginald's cabin that night by Jenkins, who hesitated to speak. You argued with Sir Reginald about this past wrong. You wore a dark coat, and its fabric. Silence as Jenkins was called to confirm the body's location. Poirot's trap had worked. The pressure had broken Blake's resolve. As the crew retrieved the body, the truth settled over the yacht like a heavy fog. Hastings whispered, You did it, Poirot. You found him. Poirot's smile was faint. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what others miss. As the yacht prepared to return to shore, the mystery was solved, but the cost of truth hung heavy in the air. Man's life. In a moment of panic, Blake had pushed Sir Reginald, who fell, struck his head, and died. Desperate to cover his crime, Blake had hidden the body and planted the cigarette case to suggest flight, while the torn fabric from Mrs. Langley's coat, borrowed without her knowledge, had been an attempt to cast suspicion elsewhere. And the pendant? Hastings asked. Why did Sir Reginald give it to Clara? Poirot's gaze softened. A father's gesture, Hastings. Sir Reginald knew his past was catching up. The pendant was a gift for Clara's future, a safeguard against the ruin he feared might come. He urged her to trust no one, sensing the danger but not its source. Poor Mademoiselle Clara, she carried the weight of his fear without understanding it. The guests, now subdued, were preparing to disembark as the yacht neared the quay. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her face etched with grief, sat in her cabin, comforted by Clara, whose own sorrow was tempered by relief at the truth. Miss Irene Duval, exonerated as C.D. but shaken by her own secrets, kept to herself, her theatrical flair dimmed. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp tongue silenced, watched the horizon with a newfound sobriety. Victor Crane, his obsession with Clara exposed as mere infatuation, smoked alone, his bravado gone. Mr. Harold Weston, ever the stoic solicitor, busied himself with papers, though his hands trembled slightly. Philip Marlowe, his role as a bystander confirmed, seemed almost relieved to fade into the background. Dr. Blake, confined to his cabin under Jenkins's watch, awaited the authorities who would meet the yacht at the quay. His confession had been a catharsis, but it offered no solace to those left behind. The crew, somber but efficient, prepared the vessel for its return, their respect for Poirot evident in their quiet deference. Hastings leaned against the railing, his voice low. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Sir Reginald wasn't a saint, but to die like that, betrayed by someone he trusted, it's hard to stomach." Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a fragile thing. It seeks redemption, but it also harbors vengeance. Sir Reginald sought to right his wrongs, but his past was a shadow he could not escape. Dr. Blake, too, was a victim of that. Of Sir Reginald's disappearance is solved. Dr. Blake has confessed, and justice will follow. But let us not forget the cost of secrets. They fester, they destroy. If there is one truth to carry from this voyage, it is this: honesty, though difficult, is the only shield against such tragedy." Lady Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she nodded. Clara clutched her mother's hand, her face a mix of sorrow and resolve. The others sat in silence, their thoughts turned inward. Poirot bowed slightly and left the saloon, Hastings at his side. As they stepped onto the quay, the sun dipping below the horizon, Hastings turned to Poirot. "You've done it again, old chap, but it never gets easier, does it?" Poirot's smile was wistful. "Non, mon ami. Each case it leaves its mark. But the little grey cells, they persevere, for that is their purpose, to seek the truth, no matter the cost." With that, Poirot adjusted his hat, his step light despite the weight of the case. The sapphire yacht lay behind them, its secrets laid bare, as they walked into the twilight, ready for the next mystery that awaited the indomitable Hercule Poirot. The shadows of truth. The sapphire yacht had docked at St. Mary's Quay under a sky bruised with twilight, its once glorious silhouette now a somber monument to the tragedy that had unfolded. The revelation of Dr. Lionel Blake's guilt in the murder of Sir Reginald Haverford had left the guests in a state of quiet shock, their voices hushed as they prepared to disembark. The cove, with its serene waters and distant cliffs, seemed to mock the turmoil that had consumed the vessel, and Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the deck with his notebook, felt a lingering unease despite the case's resolution. The truth had been uncovered, but its shadows stretched long. Hercule Poirot, his pale grey suit untouched by the chaos, his moustache a perfect arc, stood at the gangway, his green eyes scanning the quay where the local authorities awaited to take Dr. Blake into custody. The detective's demeanor was calm, but beneath his composed exterior, Hastings sensed a quiet melancholy, a recognition of the human frailties that had led to such a crime. "It is not enough to find the truth, Hastings," Poirot said softly. He clutched the sapphire pendant, its deep blue a stark reminder of her father's final gift. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp wit subdued, watched the proceedings with a quiet intensity. Victor Crane, his cigarettes abandoned, sat with his head bowed, his earlier bravado replaced by introspection. Miss Irene Duval, exonerated but shaken, twisted her scarf, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Harold Weston, the solicitor, scribbled notes, his face impassive but his hands unsteady. Philip Marlowe, his charm dimmed, stood near the door, as if eager to escape the yacht's oppressive air. Poirot addressed the group, his voice steady and resonant. "Mesdames et messieurs, the mystery of Sir Reginald's death is solved. Dr. Blake has confessed, and the authorities will take him from here. But before we part, I wish to address the shadows that remain, the secrets that drove this tragedy. Sir Reginald was a man haunted by his past, seeking redemption but finding betrayal. His death was not just a crime, but a culmination of choices, his own and others." Lady Evelyn's voice was soft but firm. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given us the truth, but it doesn't ease the pain. Reginald was flawed, but he was my husband. What drove Dr. Blake to such an act? Poirot's eyes softened. Madam, Dr. Blake was bound to Sir Reginald by a shared secret, a medical procedure years ago that ended in a man's death. Sir Reginald profited, while Dr. Blake bore the guilt. When Sir Reginald threatened to expose that truth, fearing his own ruin, Dr. Blake acted in panic. It was not premeditated, but it was fatal. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke. Father gave me the pendant to protect me, didn't he? He knew something was wrong. Poirot nodded. Oui, mademoiselle. The pendant was his gesture of love, a safeguard for your future. He sensed danger, though he did not know its source. The ledger entry for CD was a misdirection, meant to confuse, but it pointed to a past wrong, not to Mademoiselle Duval. Miss Duval, her voice barely a whisper, said, I thought he'd betrayed me again. I was wrong to doubt him. Poirot's gaze was gentle. You sought justice, mademoiselle, and in your confession, you helped us find it. Do not carry guilt.
I knew he was under strain, but not the extent. My role was to manage his affairs, not his conscience. Philip Marlowe, silent until now, spoke up. I feel like a fool, standing on the sidelines while all this unfolded. I should have paid more attention. Poirot's voice was kind. You are young, Monsieur Marlowe. Life teaches us to see what matters in time. As the guests prepared to disembark, Poirot drew Hastings aside. The shadows, Hastings. They are not just in the crime, but in the lives it touched. Each person here carries a piece of this tragedy, and they must learn to live with it. Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. It's not just about solving the case, is it? It's about understanding why it happened. Précisément, Poirot said. The human heart, it seeks to hide, but it also seeks to heal. We have given them the truth. Now, they must find their peace. The authorities boarded the yacht, and Dr. Blake was led away, his face ashen, but his shoulders slumped in resignation. Lady Evelyn and Clara stepped onto the quay, arm in arm, their grief a quiet bond. Miss Duval followed, her steps hesitant, but her head held high. Mrs. Langley, Victor Crane, Mr. Weston, and Philip Marlowe disembarked in silence, each lost in their thoughts. As the yacht was secured, Poirot and Hastings stood on the quay, the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and closure. Hastings turned to his friend. You've done it again, Poirot. But it feels different this time, sadder somehow. Poirot's eyes were distant, fixed on the horizon. Each case, mon ami, is a mirror to the soul. This one showed us guilt, redemption, and the fragility of trust. But the little grey cells, they do not falter. They seek the truth, always, so that others may find their way. With a final glance at the sapphire yacht, Poirot adjusted his hat and walked toward the waiting car, his step light, but his heart heavy with the weight of human frailty. Hastings followed, knowing that wherever Poirot went, another mystery would soon call, and the little grey cells would answer. Chapter 13. The Echoes of Motive. The sapphire yacht rested quietly at St. Mary's Quay.
The detective's mind, always active, was now piecing together the deeper currents of human nature that had led to such a tragic outcome. The case is closed, Hastings, he said softly, his voice carrying a note of introspection. But the motives, they echo beyond the crime. We must understand them, for they are the roots from which such tragedies grow. Hastings tucked his notebook under his arm, his brow furrowed. I thought we had it all figured out, Poirot. Dr. Blake's guilt, the old scandal, the panic. But you're saying there's more, something we missed. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. Not missed, mon ami, but not fully explored. The crime is solved, but the why? It is a tapestry of human desires and fears. Let us speak with the others one last time, to hear the echoes of their motives. The guests, still reeling from the previous day's confrontation, had gathered their belongings and were preparing to depart the yacht. Lady Evelyn Haverford, her grief now tempered by a steely resolve, stood with Clara, their bond a quiet strength against the pain of loss. Clara clutched the sapphire pendant, its deep blue a bittersweet reminder of her father's final act of love. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp wit now subdued, carried herself with a newfound gravity.
Victor Crane, his cigarettes replaced by a somber silence, seemed lost in thought. Miss Irene Duval, her earlier fears assuaged, moved with a fragile dignity. Mr. Harold Weston, ever the meticulous solicitor, organized his papers with mechanical precision, while Philip Marlowe, his charm dimmed, lingered at the edge of the group, as if eager to escape the yacht's oppressive memories. Poirot requested a final meeting in the saloon, and the guests, though weary, complied. The chandeliers cast a soft glow over their faces, each marked by the toll of the past week. Poirot stood at the center, his small stature commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady and resonant, "the truth of Sir Reginald's death has been revealed, and Dr. Blake will face justice. But before we part, I wish to explore the motives that wove this tragedy. Each of you held a piece of Sir Reginald's life, his secrets, his fears, his hopes. Let us speak of them, so that we may understand." Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice soft but firm. "Monsieur,
Me about the threat. I could have helped him." Poirot's voice softened. "Mademoiselle, your father wished to spare you pain. The threat, I believe, came from his fear of exposure, not just by Dr. Blake, but by others who knew of his past dealings. The pendant was his way of ensuring you would be cared for, should his empire crumble." Miss Duval, her voice trembling, spoke next. "I was CD in his ledger, but only because he owed my family for what he did years ago. I thought he was running from that debt when he vanished. I misjudged him." Poirot nodded. "Your anger was justified, mademoiselle, but your honesty helped us see the truth. Sir Reginald intended to make amends, but his time ran out." Mrs. Langley's tone was quieter than usual. "And my coat, used to cast suspicion on me. Was that Dr. Blake's plan all along?" "Oui, madame," Poirot said. "Dr. Blake borrowed your coat to mislead us, knowing your sharp tongue made you a plausible suspect. But the fabric, it was too deliberate, and the little grey cells saw through it." Victor Crane looked up, his face drawn. "I kept quiet about the argument I heard because I thought it was Clara. I didn't want to hurt her. But it was Dr. Blake, wasn't it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You saw more than you admitted, Monsieur Crane. The argument before dinner was indeed with Dr. Blake, whose low voice you mistook for a man's. Your silence, though well-intentioned, delayed the truth." Mr. Weston, his pen still, spoke curtly. "I managed Sir Reginald's finances, but I didn't know the depth of his troubles. If I had, I might have warned him." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "You knew of his strain, Monsieur Weston, but you chose discretion. It is understandable, but it left Sir Reginald alone in his fear." Philip Marlowe, his voice subdued, added, "I was just a bystander, caught up in this mess. But I wish I'd paid more attention to Sir Reginald's mood. He seemed haunted." Poirot's smile was faint. "You are young, Monsieur Marlowe. You saw what you were meant to see, a grand party, not a man's unravelling." As the guests shared their reflections, Hastings marvelled at Poirot's ability to draw out their deepest thoughts, revealing the motive remained on the deck, the yacht now silent behind them. Hastings turned to his friend. "You've not only solved the crime, Poirot, but you've given them a way to understand it. That's more than most detectives would do." Poirot's eyes were fixed on the sea, his voice soft. "The crime, Hastings, is but the surface. Beneath it lies the human heart, flawed, fragile, and seeking redemption. We uncover the truth not just for justice, but to help those left behind find their way." As the last guests departed, Poirot adjusted his hat, his step light despite the weight of the case. "Come, mon ami," he said. "The key awaits, and with it, the world beyond. There will be other mysteries, and the little grey cells, they are ready." Hastings followed, the echoes of motive lingering in his mind, as the sapphire yacht faded into the twilight, a vessel of secrets now at rest. Chapter 14. The Weight of Redemption. The sapphire yacht stood silent at St. Mary's Quay, its once vibrant decks now cloaked in the sombre aftermath of Sir Reginald Haverford's murder. The truth, meticulously unravelled by Hercule Poirot, had exposed Dr. Lionel Blake as the culprit, but the resolution brought little joy to the guests, who now faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives in the wake of betrayal and loss. The evening air was crisp,
the sea a restless murmur against the quay, and Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the gangway with his notebook, felt the lingering echoes of the tragedy like a chill that refused to fade. Hercule Poirot, his pale grey suit as immaculate as ever, his moustache a perfect crescent, gazed out at the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of amber and violet. His green eyes, usually sharp with purpose, now held a reflective depth, as if he were weighing the moral complexities of the case. "The crime is solved, Hastings," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet gravitas. "But the heart, it carries its wounds long after justice is served. We must consider the redemption sought by those left behind." Hastings closed his notebook, his expression troubled. "Redemption, Poirot? For Dr. Blake, perhaps, in confessing? Or do you mean the others?" Auburn hair catching the fading light. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp tongue now silent, adjusted her hat with a deliberate calm. Victor Crane, his cigarettes forsaken, leaned against the railing, his gaze lost in the sea. Miss Irene Duval, her earlier fragility replaced by a quiet resolve, stood alone, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. Mr. Harold Weston, his papers neatly organized, moved with mechanical precision, while Philip Marlowe, his charm subdued, lingered near the gangway, eager to leave the yacht's memories behind. Poirot approached Lady Evelyn and Clara first, his manner gentle. "Madame, mademoiselle," he said, bowing slightly. "The truth has been a heavy burden, but it is also a path to healing. Sir Reginald's love for you, it shone in his final acts. The pendant, the letter. Will you carry that forward?" Lady Evelyn's voice was steady but soft. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given us clarity, but the pain remains. Reginald was not perfect, but he was ours. I will honor his memory by protecting Clara's future, as he wished." Clara's eyes glistened, her fingers tightening around the pendant. "Father made mistakes, but he tried to make them right. I'll keep this pendant not just as a gift, but as a reminder to be better than the secrets he kept." Poirot nodded, his eyes warm. "That is true redemption, mademoiselle, to learn from the past and build a better future." He moved to Miss Duval, who stood apart, her face a mix of relief and sorrow. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you sought justice for your family's ruin. The truth has cleared your name, but what will you seek now?" Miss Duval's voice trembled. "I thought money would heal the wound, but it was the truth I needed. I misjudged Sir Reginald, and I'll carry that regret. But I'll move forward, for my family's sake." Poirot's smile was encouraging. "You have shown courage, mademoiselle. Let it guide you." Mrs. Langley, overhearing, approached with a wry smile. "You've turned us all inside out, Monsieur Poirot. My coat, my reputation, nearly ruined. But I suppose I should thank you for clearing my name." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, your wit is a shield, but it hides a heart that sees much. Use that." Philip Marlowe, lingering near the gangway, offered a sheepish grin. "I was useless, wasn't I? Just a bystander in all this." Poirot's smile was gentle. "You are young, Monsieur Marlowe. Life will teach you to see beyond the surface. Be ready when it does." As the guests began to disembark, their steps heavy with the weight of their reflections, Poirot and Hastings lingered on the deck. The authorities had taken Dr. Blake, and the yacht was now a hollow shell, its secrets laid bare. Hastings turned to his friend, his voice low. "You've given them more than justice, Poirot. You've given them a way to move forward. That's no small thing." Poirot's gaze was fixed on the sea, his voice soft. "Justice, Hastings, is but the first step. Redemption is the journey that follows. Sir Reginald sought it, Dr. Blake sought it, and now those left behind must find it. The little grey cells, they uncover the truth, but it is the heart that must heal." The quay was bustling now, as the guests stepped onto solid ground, their futures uncertain, but their burdens lighter. Lady Evelyn and Clara walked arm in arm, their silhouettes a testament to their shared strength. Miss Duval followed, her head high, her steps purposeful. Mrs. Langley, Victor Crane, Mr. Weston, and Philip Marlowe dispersed into the twilight, each carrying a piece of the tragedy, but also a glimmer of hope. Poirot adjusted his hat, his step light despite the case's gravity. "Come, mon ami," he said, gesturing toward the waiting car. "The world awaits, and with it, new mysteries.
The little grey cells, they are never idle. Hastings followed, the weight of redemption lingering in his mind, as the sapphire yacht faded into the gathering dusk, its story complete, but its echoes enduring. Chapter 15, The Final Departure. The sapphire yacht lay anchored at St. Mary's Quay, its once dazzling presence now subdued, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its opulent walls. The murder of Sir Reginald Haverford, solved by Hercule Poirot's unerring logic, had left the guests forever changed, their lives marked by the weight of truth and the hope of redemption. The night air was cool, the stars piercing the velvet sky, and Captain Arthur Hastings, standing on the quay with his notebook tucked away, felt a sense of closure. Lessons, they travel with us. Hastings adjusted his hat, his expression thoughtful. You've done more than solve a crime, Poirot. You've given them a way to face their pasts. Lady Evelyn, Clara, even Miss Duval. But what about you? Does it ever weigh on you, carrying all these truths? Poirot's lips curled into a faint, wistful smile. The little grey cells, mon ami, they bear the burden gladly, for it is their purpose. But the heart, it feels the cost. Come, let us take our final leave of this place, and of those who must now find their own paths. The guests had nearly all departed, their figures fading into the night as they stepped onto the quay, their luggage in tow. Lady Evelyn Haverford and Clara stood together, their silhouettes framed against the yacht's gleaming hull. Lady Evelyn's face, though etched with grief, held a quiet strength, her arm around her daughter a testament to their unbreakable bond. Clara, the sapphire pendant glinting at her throat, looked out at the sea, her eyes bright with resolve to honour her father's memory. Miss Irene Duval, her scarf fluttering in the breeze, paused to glance back at the yacht, her face a mix of regret and relief. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her sharp demeanour softened by the ordeal, walked with a measured grace, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Victor Crane, his theatrical flair dimmed, carried his suitcase with a newfound humility. Mr. Harold Weston, his papers secured, moved with the precision of a man seeking order in chaos. Philip Marlowe, his youth tempered by the tragedy, offered a quiet nod to Poirot as he passed, a silent acknowledgement of the detective's genius. Poirot approached Lady Evelyn and Clara, his manner gentle. "Madame, mademoiselle," he said, bowing slightly, "you have faced great sorrow, but you have also shown great courage. The pendant, it is a symbol of your father's love, and it will guide you forward." Lady Evelyn's voice was steady. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You've given us the truth, painful though it is. We will carry on, for Reginald's sake and for our own." Clara's eyes met Poirot's, her voice soft but firm. "I'll keep the pendant, not as a treasure, but as a reminder, to be honest, to be brave. Father would have wanted that." "I suppose I owe you for clearing my name, though I'll never admit to liking your methods." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Your wit, madame, is a formidable weapon. Wield it with care, and it will serve you well." Victor Crane, pausing at the gangway, offered a sheepish nod. "I made mistakes, keeping quiet when I shouldn't have. I won't make them again." Poirot's tone was kind. "You sought to protect Monsieur Crane. Let that instinct guide you, but pair it with truth." Mr. Weston, his briefcase in hand, gave a curt nod. "You've done your work, Monsieur Poirot. I'll ensure Sir Reginald's affairs are settled properly." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "Do so with integrity, monsieur. It is what he would have wished." Philip Marlowe, last to disembark, offered a faint grin. "You're a marvel, Monsieur Poirot. I'll be telling this story for years, though I hope I'm never in another like it." Poirot chuckled softly. "Stay observant, Monsieur Marlowe. Life has many mysteries, and you may yet solve one." As the guests dispersed into the night, their figures swallowed by the shadows of St. Mary's Quay, Poirot and Hastings stood alone, the yacht looming behind them. The crew, under Jenkins's quiet direction, secured the vessel, its role in the tragedy now complete. Hastings turned to his friend, his voice low. "You've changed them, Poirot. They're leaving this place different than when they arrived." Poirot's eyes were fixed on the stars, his voice soft. "The truth, Hastings, it is a mirror. It shows us who we are and who we might become. Sir Reginald sought redemption, Dr. Blake sought escape, and those left behind seek healing. The little grey cells, they uncover the truth, but it is the heart that must carry it." The quay was quiet now, the guests gone,
The authorities departed with Dr. Blake in custody. Poirot adjusted his hat, his step light despite the weight of the case. "Come, mon ami," he said, gesturing toward the waiting car. "The world beyond awaits, with its joys and its sorrows, and where there is life, there will always be mysteries for Hercule Poirot." Hastings followed, the sapphire yacht fading into the darkness behind them, its secrets laid bare, its story complete. The night stretched ahead, vast and unknowable, but with Poirot's genius to guide them, Hastings knew they would face whatever came next with courage and clarity.